The peaceful morning shift aboard the Coalition space station turned into chaos when the long-range sensors lit up with unknown signals. Officer Tom rushed to his commander's station, nearly dropping his morning drink in his hurry. The unknown ship had appeared at the edge of their space, moving slowly and making no attempt to hide itself. Commander Gray stood at the main viewport, his 4 eyes fixed on the distant spot where their sensors showed the ship would be visible soon. In his 30 years of service, he had never seen a design like this. The ship was small by Coalition standards, barely the size of a regular transport vessel, but its energy readings were odd. "Sir, the ship's hull configuration doesn't match anything in our database," Tom said, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "But the material analysis shows it's made of basic metals. No quantum shielding, no gravity plating. It's practically primitive." Gray nodded slowly. As the head of first contact situations in this sector, he had seen many new species join the Coalition. All of them had followed the same pattern: quantum technology first, then gravity control, then space travel. But this ship seemed to break all those rules. "Send out the greeting drones," Gray ordered. Standard protocol was clear: approach unknown ships with automated systems first, to avoid any accidental conflicts. The small round drones shot out from the station, their lights blinking in the universal pattern of peace. The unknown ship slowed as the drones approached. At first, everything seemed normal. Then Officer Reed, a young recruit on his first deep space assignment, noticed something on his scanner. "Sir, energy spike from the unknown vessel. They're powering up something." Gray leaned forward to look at Reed's screen. The ship had indeed activated several systems, but the energy pattern was unusual. Instead of the typical weapon signatures, these looked more like... Before Gray could finish his thought, Reed's hand slammed down on the weapon controls. The station's automated defense system, responding to his panic, fired a full burst of plasma torpedoes at the unknown vessel. Gray's shout of "Stop!" came too late. The unknown ship had no chance. Without quantum shielding, the plasma torpedoes tore through its hull like paper. The explosion lit up space like a new star being born. As the light faded, the station's crew watched in horror as pieces of the ship drifted apart. "What have you done?" Gray's voice was barely a whisper. "Those energy readings, they were scanning equipment, scientific instruments. That was a research vessel." Reed stood frozen at his station, his face pale. "But the power spike, I thought." "You thought wrong." Gray cut him off. "Now we have to." "Sir," Tom's voice cracked with urgency. "Small object ejecting from the debris field. It's an escape pod." They watched as a tiny pod shot out from the wreckage, its emergency thrusters flaring brightly. Before they could react, it jumped into faster than light speed, disappearing from their sensors. Gray felt a deep sense of dread settle in his stomach. The pod had been too small to track, and it had jumped away too quickly for them to plot its course. Somewhere out there, someone had survived. Someone who had watched their ship, their crewmates, their friends, die in an unprovoked attack. "Get me the Coalition Council," Gray ordered, his voice heavy. "And start collecting all sensor data. We need to know everything about that ship and its origin." He turned to Reed, who still hadn't moved from his position. "You're relieved of duty. Report to your quarters and wait for further instructions." As the young officer left the command center, Gray turned back to the viewport. Among the debris, something caught his eye. A piece of the ship's hull was spinning slowly, and on it, he could make out some markings. Tom's computer quickly translated the alien script. "U.S. Horizon, Earth Scientific Research Vessel." Earth. A new word, a new species, and already they had blood between them. As Gray watched the debris field slowly spread out against the backdrop of stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Something told him that whoever these humans were, they wouldn't let this incident go unanswered. He had no idea how right he was. 3 months passed since the destruction of the human research vessel. Life in Coalition space had returned to normal, or so it seemed. Trade ships moved between stars, colonies went about their business, and most people had forgotten about the incident entirely. That changed on a quiet afternoon when Officer Tom's sensor station lit up like a festival display. At first, he thought his equipment was malfunctioning. Thousands of small objects had appeared simultaneously throughout Coalition space. They were everywhere, near space stations, in shipping lanes, around colonies, and even in the heart of Coalition territory. "Commander Gray," Tom called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You need to see this." Gray walked over, two of his eyes checking the main screen while his other two scanned the incoming data. The objects were small, about the size of escape pods, but they weren't moving. They just hung in space, waiting. Before Gray could give any orders, every communication system in the station activated at once. A message began playing, repeating in all 5 Coalition languages. The voice was artificial, calm, and completely emotionless. "You have attacked an unarmed human vessel. You have 30 days to prepare your response." The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. In its place came detailed footage of the destruction of the research vessel, played from multiple angles Gray had never seen before. It showed clearly that the ship had been scanning, not attacking. The footage ended with a countdown timer: 30 days, 0 hours, 0 minutes. The Coalition Council called an emergency meeting within the hour. Gray watched on the main screen as the council members argued. Admiral Black, the head of the Coalition fleet, spoke with confidence that bordered on arrogance. "This is clearly a bluff," the admiral said, his scaled skin reflecting the council chamber's lights. "Our combined fleet numbers over 10,000 ships. We control this entire sector of space. No single species could possibly threaten us." Ambassador Jack, one of the few voices of reason on the council, disagreed. "We know nothing about these humans. The level of technology needed to place thousands of beacons across our territory simultaneously, without being detected, is far beyond our capabilities. We should consider opening diplomatic channels immediately." The debate raged on, but in the end, Admiral Black's view won out. The Coalition would treat this as a show of force and respond accordingly. They began moving their fleets into defensive positions, preparing for what they believed would be a simple show of superiority. Back on the station, Tom was working late into the night shift, studying the beacons. Something about them bothered him. He ran scan after scan, and finally found what he was looking for. "Commander," he called Gray, who had been about to end his shift. "These beacons, they're not just broadcasting messages. They're studying us. Every scan we run on them, they run 2 back at us. They're mapping our technology, our capabilities, our weaknesses." Gray felt that same sense of dread he'd experienced 3 months ago returned stronger than ever. He opened a channel to Coalition Command, but before he could speak, Tom interrupted again. "Sir, the beacons, they're changing. On every screen, in every Coalition system, the beacons began broadcasting a new message. This time, the artificial voice had a hint of what almost sounded like amusement. "Thank you for the data. You have 29 days remaining. Recommendation: use them wisely." Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, every beacon winked out of existence. Later analysis would show they hadn't exploded or jumped away. They had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind no trace they were ever there. That night, as Gray stared out at the stars from his office, he thought about everything that had happened. The humans hadn't just delivered a message. They had demonstrated capabilities that should have been impossible. They had appeared everywhere at once, gathered massive amounts of data about Coalition technology, and disappeared without a trace. And they had done it all without firing a single shot. The countdown continued on every Coalition screen, a constant reminder that somewhere out there, humanity was watching and waiting. The spy ship drifted silently at the edge of Coalition space, Its sensors stretched to their absolute limits. Captain Gray had requested this assignment specifically. After the beacon incident, he needed to see what was coming. The small ship's stealth systems were the best the Coalition had ever built, making it virtually invisible to known detection methods. "Another trading ship has changed course," reported Tom, who had asked to join this mission after their shared experience with the beacons. "That's the 15th one today. They're all avoiding this entire sector of space." Gray nodded, watching the long-range display. The normally busy trade routes had become eerily empty over the past week. Ships would approach the sector, then suddenly change course, as if they knew something Gray couldn't see. The emptiness was more frightening than any fleet of warships. "Run another deep space scan," Gray ordered. "Focus on the areas the traders are avoiding." Tom adjusted the sensors, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. Then he noticed something odd. "Sir, look at this." He pointed to a section of space that appeared completely empty. "The stars behind this area. They're wrong." Gray moved closer to the display. At first, he couldn't see what Tom meant. Then he noticed it too. The starlight from distant systems was bending slightly, creating patterns that shouldn't exist in empty space. "Enhance that section," Gray ordered, his 4 eyes fixed on the display. As the image cleared, more anomalies became visible. Light wasn't just bending. It was being redirected, wrapped around something massive that their sensors couldn't detect. "Sir," Tom's voice was barely a whisper, "I think we're looking at a stealth system far beyond anything we've ever seen. Not just one ship. I'm detecting similar light patterns across this entire sector. We're surrounded." Gray felt a chill run down his spine. The trading ships weren't avoiding empty space. They were detecting these hidden vessels somehow. The humans had been moving their fleet into position, piece by piece, completely invisible to Coalition sensors. As they watched, they noticed more details. Tiny fluctuations in gravity, almost too small to measure. Brief flickers of energy that disappeared before they could be properly scanned. Space itself seemed to ripple occasionally, like waves on a pond when something moves beneath the surface. "They're not just hiding their ships," Tom said, his fingers flying over the sensor controls. "They're bending the basic laws of physics. The power needed to do this. It's beyond anything we thought possible." Gray was about to respond when every system on their ship suddenly went dark. The emergency lights kicked in, casting a red glow across the bridge. On their main screen, a message appeared. "Greetings, Captain Gray. Your curiosity is noted and appreciated. Since you've worked so hard to find us, we thought it only fair to give you a closer look." The message disappeared, and their systems came back online. But now their sensors were picking up something new. The light distortions were changing, becoming more pronounced. Like a curtain being slowly pulled aside, they began to see shapes emerging from the seemingly empty space. Ships, hundreds of them. Their designs were unlike anything in Coalition records, smooth, sleek vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They were arranged in a complex three-dimensional pattern that Gray recognized from old military texts. It was a containment formation, designed to prevent anything from escaping. "Sir," Tom's voice cracked slightly. "These ships, the smallest one is bigger than our largest battleship, and there are hundreds more still hidden. I can see their gravitational effects." Gray stared at the display, understanding finally dawning on him. The humans hadn't needed the full 30 days to prepare their response. They had already been here, watching, waiting. The countdown wasn't for them to get ready. It was to give the Coalition time to realize the hopelessness of their situation. "Send a message to Coalition Command," Gray ordered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Tell them we found the humans, or rather, they let us find them. And if these ships are any indication, we have greatly underestimated what we're dealing with." As Gray finished speaking, the human ships vanished again, fading back into their perfect stealth. But now he knew they were there, watching, The only question was, what were they waiting for? Admiral Black stood proudly on the bridge of his flagship, watching as 2,000 coalition ships moved into defensive positions. They had chosen this spot carefully, a narrow section of space between three star systems where any attacking fleet would be forced to bunch up. It was the perfect killing ground. The countdown timer on every ship's display showed 5 days remaining, but coalition intelligence suggested the humans would attack here first. The admiral was confident. Each of his ships carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Together, they formed the largest battle group ever assembled in coalition history. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting a spatial distortion directly ahead." The admiral smiled. Finally, they would see these mysterious humans in action. He expected a fleet to match his own. Instead, a single ship emerged from stealth. The human vessel was beautiful in a strange way. It was long and sleek, painted a deep black that seemed to swallow light. It was larger than a coalition heavy cruiser but smaller than a battleship. A single ship against 2,000. The admiral actually laughed. They send one ship. Are they trying to surrender? He opened a broadcast channel. "This is Admiral Black of the Coalition Defense Fleet. Your 30 days are not yet complete, but since you're here, I accept your surrender." The response came immediately, in a calm, almost friendly voice. "This is the human warship Defiant. We are here to conduct a weapons demonstration. Please stand by." Before the admiral could respond, his tactical officer shouted in alarm, "Sir, energy spike from the human vessel. It's like nothing I've ever." The human ship fired. A beam of pure white light lanced out, slicing through space itself. It hit the admiral's flagship dead center and passed straight through the shields as if they didn't exist. The beam continued through his ship, through the ship behind it, and the one behind that. In total, 20 coalition vessels were split in half by that single shot. "Impossible," the admiral shouted. "All ships, open fire." 2,000 coalition ships fired everything they had. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and graviton missiles streaked toward the human vessel. The space around it lit up like a newborn sun. When the light faded, the human ship was undamaged. Not even its paint was scratched. "Thank you for participating in part 1 of our demonstration," the calm voice said. "Now for part 2. The human ship's hull began to glow with a soft blue light. Small pods ejected from its sides, each no bigger than a shuttle. The pods shot toward the coalition fleet, easily dodging the continuing barrage of fire. "Sir," the tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. "Those pods, they're passing through our shields too. They're attaching to our ships." One by one, coalition ships began shutting down. No explosions, no destruction. They simply went dark, drifting helplessly in space. In less than 5 minutes, half the fleet was disabled. The human ship's voice came again. "Part 2 complete. Your ships have not been destroyed. We have simply turned them off. They will restart in approximately 1 hour. Now for the final part of our demonstration." The ship fired again. But this time the beam was different. It hit one of the disabled coalition ships, and the vessel simply disappeared. Not exploded, not broken apart. It ceased to exist, leaving behind not even debris. As you can see, we could have done this from the start. Every disabled ship in your fleet could have been erased. Remember this, you have 5 days remaining. Use them wisely. The human ship vanished back into stealth, leaving behind a scene of complete defeat. 1,000 coalition ships drifted powerless in space. Another 20 had been cut in half, their crews desperately evacuating. And one ship had been erased from existence, leaving a gap in space where it had been. Admiral Black stood silently on his ruined bridge, watching emergency teams try to seal the perfect cut that split his flagship in two. His entire career, he had believed the coalition was invincible. Now, in less than 10 minutes, a single human ship had proven him devastatingly wrong. In 5 days, they would have to answer for their actions. And now, finally, he understood true fear. Deep inside a secret coalition research facility, Dr. Smith stared at his computer screen with growing horror. For 3 months, he and his team had been studying the debris from the destroyed human research vessel. Today, they had finally cracked the ship's damaged data core. "This can't be right," he muttered, rechecking his findings. "Run the analysis again," he ordered his assistant. But the results came back the same. The facility's walls shook as another coalition ship crashed during landing. After the battle with the single human warship, damaged vessels had been arriving constantly for emergency repairs. But Dr. Smith barely noticed. He was too focused on what he had discovered. The human research ship's database contained their species' history. As he read through it, everything about their technology, their capabilities, and their reaction to the attack began to make terrible sense. He grabbed his datapad and rushed to the emergency council meeting. When he entered the room, Admiral Black was speaking, his ship's medical patches still visible on his scales. "We just need better weapons," the Admiral was saying. "No species can be this powerful. There must be a weakness." "There isn't," Dr. Smith interrupted. All eyes turned to him. "I've found out what humans are. And we've made a terrible mistake." He connected his pad to the main display. Images appeared. A planet with vast oceans, towering mountains, and dozens of different environments. "Earth. This is the human homeworld," he explained. "Unlike our worlds, which are stable and peaceful, Earth is what they call a death world. Powerful storms, active volcanoes, earthquakes, extreme temperatures, everything about their planet tries to kill them." He showed more images. Humans fighting massive creatures, surviving in frozen wastes, crossing burning deserts. While our species evolved in harmony with our environments, humans had to fight for every minute of their existence. Their entire history is an endless series of survival challenges. And here's the most important part. They never stopped fighting, even after mastering their world. The next images showed human conflicts through history. The council members watched in shock as humans went from fighting with simple tools to creating increasingly powerful weapons. "Every human technology serves multiple purposes," Dr. Smith continued. "Their medical scanners can be weapons because they had to be ready for war even in their hospitals. Their stealth technology came from trying to hide from each other. Even their research vessels, like the one we destroyed, are built tough enough to survive combat." He paused, letting his next words sink in. The ship we destroyed wasn't just studying space. It was carrying research about a deadly virus affecting multiple species. They were trying to find a cure. Humans put their best scientific equipment on their toughest ships because they learned the hard way that knowledge must be protected. The room was silent. Finally, Ambassador Jack spoke. "Are you saying they're naturally violent?" "No," Dr. Smith replied. "I'm saying they're naturally prepared. Look at this." He showed the final image, a human rescue team saving aliens from a crashed ship. Humans are protective, not aggressive. They build powerful weapons because their history taught them that peace must be defended. They make their medical ships tough because healing others is as important as fighting. Everything they do has one purpose: survival, not just their own, but everyone they consider under their protection. The Admiral, who had been silent, finally spoke. "The demonstration. They didn't destroy our ships when they could have." "Exactly," Dr. Smith nodded. "They showed us 3 things. First, that they can ignore our best defenses. Second, that they can disable us without killing. And third, that they can destroy us completely if they choose to." It wasn't just a show of force. It was a message about their values. They prefer to disable rather than destroy, but they will do whatever is necessary. As if to emphasize his point, the countdown timer on the wall clicked down another minute. Less than 5 days remained before the humans would return for their answer. "We didn't just attack a ship," Dr. Smith concluded. "We attacked everything they believe in. Peaceful research, protecting others, finding cures for the sick. Now they're coming to make sure it never happens again. The only question is, will they see us as people to protect or a threat to eliminate? Our answer in 5 days will decide that. The Coalition Council chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from all 5 species filled every seat, their voices mixing into a constant roar of argument. 2 days remained until the humans returned, and still they couldn't agree on what to do. Admiral Black stood at the main podium, his wounds from the battle now healed. "We cannot surrender," he shouted over the noise. "We have 8,000 ships remaining. If we gather them all in one place, we can overwhelm any force with sheer numbers." Did you learn nothing from the demonstration? Ambassador Jack stood up, his voice cutting through the chaos. "One human ship disabled half your fleet and erased a battleship from existence. What do you think their entire fleet will do?" The Admiral's scales darkened with anger. "So we should just give up. Accept whatever punishment they choose to give us. We should try to fix what we broke," the ambassador replied. He activated the main display, showing footage from the human research vessel's final moments. "We fired first. We destroyed scientists trying to save lives. Every action the humans have taken since then has been measured and controlled. They could have destroyed us already." Before the Admiral could respond, the chamber's doors burst open. Captain Gray rushed in, followed by Tom. Both looked like they hadn't slept in days. "The humans." Gray paused, catching his breath. "The humans are moving." The display changed, showing a massive star map. Thousands of spatial distortions were appearing, similar to what Gray had observed before. But this time, they weren't hiding. One by one, human ships dropped their stealth fields. They emerged in perfect formation, their black hulls reflecting the starlight. Hundreds of ships, then thousands, then tens of thousands. Far more than anyone had imagined possible. By the first light, someone whispered. The chamber fell silent. The human ships were arranging themselves in a pattern that stretched across Coalition space. It wasn't a battle formation. It was a net, designed to catch anything trying to escape. "We've detected over 50,000 ships so far," Tom reported, his voice shaking slightly. "And more are still appearing. They're boxing us in. Every major system, every escape route, every hidden passage we thought we had. They knew about all of them." Admiral Black sank into his chair, his confidence finally broken. How did they build so many ships without us knowing?" "They didn't just appear here," Ambassador Jack said quietly. "They'd been watching us for a long time. Probably since before we destroyed their research ship. Everything that's happened, the demonstration, the beacons, the countdown, it was all to give us a chance to show our true nature." The display changed again. The human ships had finished their deployment. The Coalition's entire territory was now surrounded by a wall of the most powerful warships ever seen. "Two paths lie before us," the ambassador continued. "We can fight and be destroyed, or we can admit our mistake and face the consequences with dignity. The humans have shown us both mercy and power. Which face they show us tomorrow depends on what we choose today." The council chamber erupted in debate again. Some supported the Admiral's call to fight. Others backed the ambassador's push for peace. Hours passed as arguments flew back and forth. Finally, an old council member stood up. She had survived 3 wars between coalition species before they had united in peace. Everyone fell silent as she spoke. "Look at what they've shown us," she said. "They have the power to destroy us, but they wait. They could have killed our crews, but they chose to disable our ships instead. Even their net formation. It's not to trap us. It's to prevent panic, to stop frightened ships from starting another incident." She walked to the center of the chamber. "The humans are not acting like conquerors. They're acting like guardians. Perhaps," she paused, looking at the display of the massive human fleet, "perhaps that's what we need. Not just punishment for our mistake, but guidance to become better." The timer on the wall clicked down another minute. In less than 48 hours, they would have to give their answer to the humans. The future of the coalition would depend on their choice. The question was, had they learned enough to make the right one? The timer reached 0, and every screen in coalition space went dark. When they lit up again, a simple message appeared. Send one ship to these coordinates. Choose your representative wisely. Captain Gray sat in the command chair of his small vessel, approaching the meeting point. The Coalition Council had chosen him after hours of debate. He had been there at the beginning of this crisis, they reasoned, so he should be there at its end. Tom worked silently at his sensor station, monitoring the massive human fleet that still surrounded Coalition space. None of the black ships had moved since taking position. They simply waited, like patient guardians. Contact ahead, Tom reported suddenly. A human ship is decloaking. The ship that appeared was unlike the warships they had seen before. It was smaller, with smooth white hull plates that seemed to glow softly. Its design spoke of peace rather than war, but Gray knew better than to think it was defenseless. A voice came through their communication system, speaking perfect Coalition standard language. Coalition vessel, this is Admiral Stone of the Human Diplomatic Corps. Permission to come aboard. Gray exchanged surprised looks with Tom. The humans wanted to board their ship, not the other way around. Permission granted, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. A soft light appeared in their ship's meeting room, and a human materialized. Gray had seen images of humans in the research vessel's database, but meeting one in person was different. Admiral Stone was shorter than him, with gray hair and warm eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. Captain Gray, she said, extending her hand. Gray had been briefed on human greeting customs and carefully shook it. Thank you for meeting with us. You seem to know who I am, Gray replied. We know everything about that day, Stone said, her smile fading. We've been watching your people for a long time. When our research vessel was destroyed, we needed to understand if it was an act of war or a tragic mistake. She gestured to the room's viewport, where the massive human fleet was visible. This show of force wasn't just about punishment. It was a test. We needed to see how your people would react under pressure, whether you would choose violence or wisdom. And what did you see? Gray asked. We saw fear turn to curiosity, Stone replied. We saw leaders argue but ultimately choose peace. Most importantly, we saw your people try to understand us rather than simply fear us. Dr. Smith's research was particularly impressive. Gray felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Then you're not here to destroy us. Stone laughed softly. Quite the opposite. We're here to invite you to join us. She waved her hand, and a hologram appeared between them. It showed hundreds of different alien species working together, building massive structures in space. Humanity learned long ago that the galaxy is too dangerous for any species to face alone, Stone explained. Disease, natural disasters, cosmic threats, these don't care about borders or politics. Our research vessel was part of a network that protects and advances all sentient life. The hologram changed, showing the ship that had been destroyed. That vessel was carrying a cure for a plague affecting 3 different species in the Orion Arm. When it was destroyed, we had to start that research over. That's why we responded so strongly, not for revenge, but to make sure it never happened again. You want us to join this network? Gray asked, beginning to understand. We want you to help us build it, Stone replied. Your people have achieved peace between different species. That's rarer than you might think. We believe you can help us create something greater than either of us could build alone. She held out her hand again. The choice is yours. Join us. Help us protect others. Let us turn this tragedy into the beginning of something remarkable. Gray looked out at the human fleet again, but now he saw them differently. Not as warships, but as guardians. Not as threats, but as protectors. He thought about his own journey, from the fear of first contact to understanding something greater. He took Stone's hand and shook it firmly. When do we begin? Stone smiled, and outside, the human ships began to move. Not to attack, but to take up new positions. defending coalition space as allies rather than watching it as potential enemies. The story of humanity's first contact with the coalition had begun with fear and misunderstanding. It would continue with hope and cooperation as two civilizations joined together to face the challenges of the galaxy, not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals united in a greater purpose. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't weapons or technology. It's understanding.